this is the craziest looking piece of meat I've ever seen. Today we're cooking 3 levels of brisket, from basic all the way up to the most insanely marbled Japanese Wagyu A5 I've ever seen. That is insane.
Oh my gosh.
But today isn't a normal day. I have an idea for a multi-day cooking process that I'm hoping will achieve the best bite of barbecue possible while keeping it medium rare.
Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
Honestly, I have no idea if this one's gonna work, but either way, let's meet the briskets. For our first contender, coming out of America, we have a USDA choice brisket. Picked this up for about $4.50 a pound, and when it comes to backyard barbecue in America, this is the standard. Moving up in the rankings, but down to the land down under, we have an Australian Wagyu brisket. With a marbling score of 8 to 9 plus, it's roughly 4 times more expensive than the first one. And when it comes to brisket, this is nearly the best of the best. And last up, we have what is truly the holy grail of beef. This is a Wagyu A5 brisket, and we're gonna be cooking it for 3 days. Specifically, this is the point section of a brisket, which in my opinion is the best part by far, but honestly from this angle, it kind of looks like a shark fin. What's cool about it being sliced this way is you can actually see both the point and some of that flat. This is the extension of the flat, which is normally super lean, but as you can see with this Wagyu A5, it is just packed with marbling. Then moving on to here, you can see the actual point, and it is just ridiculous. It almost looks like a wave, and it has gotta be well over 50% fat. Now, I really wanna see what we're working with from a marbling standpoint, so I'm actually gonna slice off a piece. Kyle, the tuna slicer. It's about 2 times a year I get to use this thing, and it's never for tuna. And believe it or not, we are cooking this thing to medium rare using a very unique technique that I'll be explaining in a little bit. Now, given the ridiculous fat content, first step, we're gonna do some trimming. We really don't need any exterior fat due to the high marbling. And by removing as much as possible, it's gonna help those seasonings stick and penetrate into the meat, and also help the smoke absorb. Doing my best to avoid slicing into any of the meat. And you better believe none of this is going to waste. It might not look pretty, but this is the best tasting fat in the world. I probably could have continued trimming, but we are left with an absurd amount of exterior fat. And to keep our comparison consistent, I am once again gonna be seasoning with salt, making sure to get all those sides. And black pepper. With it all seasoned up, time to get it on the smoker. And of course, we're smoking over applewood. And after just 2 short hours, it's already time to take it off, and this is the result. And I know based on what you guys are seeing, you're all thinking 2 of the exact same things. For one, the meat appears to be erect. Number 2, we have developed some pretty decent looking bark here, but we all know that just 2 hours in the smoker for a massive cut of meat like this will for sure not cook it through, but that's okay. The only purpose of the smoking was to develop some smoke flavor. The thing about smoke is that it sticks to raw meat significantly better than it does to cooked meat, which is gonna be very important when you understand our next step. Because we are about to cook this thing for 3 full days using the sous vide method. Before we move forward, I am gonna take a little slice off the end here. I've only cooked it to about 130 internal. Very interested to see what we're working with. Is a Wagyu A5 brisket cooked to medium rare tender at all? The answer is no. A lot of that collagen hasn't broken down. I mean, it's Wagyu A5, but brisket itself is a super tough cut. So clearly, Wagyu A5 brisket cooked to medium rare is still tough, and that's where sous vide comes in. Our vacuum bags are way too small for this, so we're using this marination bag. The idea is I need to get all the air out of it.
Hey Max, how are you gonna get all that air out of it?
Well, Kyle, I'm glad you asked. I have a straw.
We have a Hulk. This can't be healthy.
Oh, it's so smoky. You know, when I got my college degree, I never thought I'd be sucking air out of a partially cooked Wagyu A5 brisket bag, but here we are.
That's not good.
Oh, tight. Let's move on. The beauty of sous vide is you can cook to an exact temperature, in this case, right around medium rare, but you can also do it for a varied amount of time. The longer you cook something, the more tender it'll be. If we were to sous vide this brisket at 133 Fahrenheit for, let's say, 2 to 3 hours, it'd be medium rare, but still super tough. That's where time comes in. By cranking up the time to exactly 72 hours, it will once again still be medium rare, but because of that long time period, at least I'm hoping all the collagen will break down. It'll get super tender, almost like a steak. I have no idea if this is gonna get so tender to the point where it completely falls apart, or if it's gonna be not tender enough. So needless to say, this is a very expensive and risky experiment, but either way, we'll check back in about 3 days. With our Wagyu A5 sous videing, it's time to prepare the other 2 briskets. The USDA choice is completely untrimmed, and right off the bat, I can tell it's not super marbled, and the color of the meat appears a bit dull. And there is a very clear difference between that and the Australian Wagyu one. There's a super deep red color to the meat, and even here on the flat side, it is completely packed with marbling, though to be fair, it is nowhere near the Wagyu A5. Side note, I picked this one up at Josh's Premium Meats. If you're in Miami, it's the place to go for meat. Step 1, it's time to trim, and as I mentioned, the USDA Choice one has a lot of fat, so we'll make sure to get it all squared up. Even though this is the lowest grade we have today, the point section specifically is still gonna be extremely marbled, so we really don't need much fat. And just rounding off the edges for a nice aerodynamic shape. Our American brisket is all trimmed up, but take a look at how different these 2 briskets look. They've been sitting out at room temp the exact same amount of time, but they look nothing alike. The fat on the USDA Choice one is still very white and still firm to the touch, whereas the Wagyu one seems to be completely rendering at room temp. It's kind of darkened up a bit and it's way more soft. This is what you typically see with Wagyu, so I know the quality is ridiculous. The flat on this one is super wide and kind of thin, so I'm gonna take off a big chunk here and I'll trim up this end. Normally that flat is extremely lean, but as you can see, the marbling is out of control. We'll start by seasoning our American brisket heavily with salt and black pepper.
What the dog doing?
And we'll do the exact same thing to the Australian Wagyu to keep the comparison consistent. Let's get them on the grill. And you already know, we're smoking over applewood. And after about 10 hours, the bark is looking phenomenal on the Choice brisket. I did wrap for the last 2 hours of cooking, and this is the result. All I can say is, that bark is barking.
Ho!
Let the dogs out!
Ho! 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 Ho!
And slicing into it, this is exactly what we want to see. Nice smoke ring and super juicy. This is what happens when you're patient and cook low and slow for the better part of the day. There really is no better sight in the world. Hey Mom, we're on TV.
I've never been on live television before.
Brisket number 1.
Hell yeah, that's some dank brisket.
I love that bark. Perfect saltiness, barkiness.
I'm not gonna say it's the best brisket I've ever eaten, but it is very solid, especially for our first contender.
Some perfect brisket flat. I don't really know how you could do it much better than that.
It's tender, it's juicy, but Kyle, we'll find out if we can do better than that. Moving on. With our Australian Wagyu brisket probe tender, I gave it a 2-hour rest and it was time to slice. Right off the bat, I could tell this one was gonna be special.
Like the juice that just keeps on juicing.
Just incredibly packed with moisture and super tender. I don't think we'll be needing teeth for this one. We've made it to our second level of brisket, but before we taste this thing, can we get another look at that juicy shot?
Whoa, that is juicy. That other bark was great. This one is perfect.
We are in a whole new ballpark.
The flavor is just so much more pronounced.
It's a lot more rich.
It's like sweet almost. It's like coating my mouth in a really nice way.
The last brisket was great. This one's somehow even a little bit better. What is that?
That right there is a Australian Wagyu brisket, marbling score 8 to 9. That explains the richness, and to me, it is significantly better. But we still have one more to go. Well, guys, the time is finally here. It has been 3 days, well, actually 75 hours to be exact. Let's see what we got. Tibby wants to be involved here, and Kyle's holding him hostage.
Tibby, are you just guarding the brisket?
As you can see, we've changed up the sous vide, had some technical difficulties with the last one, but we have persevered. I think this is the most excited I've ever been to remove something from a sous vide bath. It looks like it's staying together. Let's crack her open. Still smells super smoky. Right off the bat, I have to say I am shocked by how big it still is. I would have assumed it would completely shrink up with all that fat rendering out, but I guess because the temperature was so low, that really didn't happen. First of all, our brisket weirdly looks like a bunny rabbit at this point, and over here we have all the liquid that came out. Honestly, it really isn't that much. I think I've talked enough. Let's slice into this thing. And this is quite possibly the craziest looking piece of meat I've ever seen. It still has a pink hue to it since we cooked it to medium rare, and it reminds me way more of like a prime rib than any sort of brisket I've ever cooked. And we'll take a few more slices. It is so tender. Literally slides through like butter. You can see how we have some of the flat just super tender and filled with moisture. Then we have the point, which as you can see is still super fatty. I can tell it is just insanely tender from that 3-day cook. But we're not quite done cooking yet.
But wait.
I squared up the slices and cut them into strips to ultimately cube them into jumbo-sized, medium-rare Wagyu A5 brisket burnt ends. That is a mouthful. Then hit them with a layer of homemade barbecue sauce. This is by far the hardest I've worked for a single bite of food, but after 30 more minutes on the smoker, they've crisped up beautifully. Glossy mahogany color as those sugars have caramelized. The only question that remains is, how do they taste? We have made it to our final brisket.
That does not look like brisket.
Kyle, would you believe that we cooked this thing for a solid 3 days to get to this one singular moment with this tiny little burnt end?
You know, Max, the only burnt ends I've had recently are Max Jerky maple bacon burnt ends, and they are fantastic.
Very good reminder, Kyle, and reminder to you guys that if you are interested in supporting the channel, be sure to check out Max Jerky. It is because of your support that we're able to do super fun videos just like this. We have tons of great flavors, all sorts of new stuff going on. So check out maxjerky.com, and we appreciate the support. And we're gloving up for this one.
Kyle? Not quite my tempo.
Cheers. Wow. That is insane.
Oh my gosh.
I don't really like it.
Dude, best things I think I've ever eaten in my life.
So much bark to meat surface area right now. Every bite is just
It's sweet, it's smoky. I was really worried it'd be way too fatty, but I think that final cook kind of rendered some of it out.
I just feel like I'm eating a stick of butter right now, but like not in the good way.
Kyle's right, it is rich. I think he's crazy, and I think this is delicious. Favorite brisket on 3? 1, 2, 3.
3.
Oh, come on. I think that second was right in the sweet spot. It was perfect.
If you can appreciate rich cuts, number 3 is by far the best. That guy's crazy. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to check out maxjerky.com, and we'll see you next time.